Hello and a very warm welcome to the students of class 10. Today let's do another poem from your English textbook, The First Flight. The poem is titled Fog, written by Carl Sandburg. Let's begin with the introduction of the poet Carl Sandburg, a well-known American poet, biographer, journalist and editor. He began his writing career as a journalist for the Chicago Daily News. He was born on 6th January 1878 in Illinois, United States. He is best known for his poems Chicago Poems, The People, Yes, Abraham Lincoln, The Prairie Years, and The War Years. Some of the notable awards. He is a winner of 3 Pulitzer Prizes, 2 for his poetry and 1 for his biography on Abraham Lincoln, 1919, 1940 and 1951. He won the Robert Frost Medal in the year 1952. He died on 22nd July 1967 in North Carolina, United States. The poet Carl Sandburg lived in Chicago, Illinois for many years. He had a fascination for cats. The Americans often liked to keep cats as domestic pets. He worked in various sectors before turning to a full writer. Interestingly, he even joined the military but was never called to a battle. The setting of most of his poems was Chicago, where he lived. Among his collection, The Fog is the shortest poem but has strong reflections and a deep meaning. The poem is hardly 25 words in total, but it has a much deeper and strong meaning. Coming to the introduction of the poem, children, Fog is probably Carl Sandburg's best known poem. In this poem, he has described the process of the arrival of the fog into the city, maybe the city of Chicago, and the harbour. He has very beautifully compared it to a cat. It's a short poem of 6 lines. It's a free verse poem having no regular rhyme scheme. A poem that reflects Sandburg's interest in the natural world and beautifully captures a moment or two when the fog came moving in over the harbour waters, a powerful image given life through a metaphorical cat. Do you know what is fog? It is a thick cloud of tiny water droplets present in the atmosphere, especially in winter in the cold countries or cold places. Although the fog does not seem to be dangerous, yet it is a cause of many accidents. The fog curtails the visibility for drivers, pedestrians, ship navigators and pilots alike. And with the increasing amount of pollution in the cities, the fog mixes with smoke, thus giving us the very dangerous smog. And smog is known to have adverse effects on not only the environment, but also it affects human beings at large. Let's now read and enjoy the poem Fog by Carl Sandburg. The fog comes on little cat feet. It sits looking over the harbour and city on silent haunches and then moves on. Here, fog means a thick cloud of tiny water droplets present in the atmosphere, especially in winter. A harbour is a port or a dock or an area of water protected from an open sea by land or walls in which ships can take shelter. And on haunches meaning sitting with knees bent. Coming to the first 2 lines of the poem, children, the fog comes on little cat feet. It tells us how the fog enters the city. Here the poet describes the advancement of the fog or the arrival of the fog in the city. It comes very slowly and calmly, like a cat on its little feet. One never knows how and when the fog will enter the city, similar to a cat that enters a home silently and stealthily. In these lines, the poet describes the arrival of the fog towards the city of Chicago. We know fog consists of tiny droplets of water suspended in the air. It is generally seen in the winter season. Here, it is a fluid, and it seems to the poet that the fog is gliding towards the city, moving towards the city. He compares this gliding movement to the movement of a cat. A cat is known to move sneakily and slyly or stealthily. Cats can do this easily owing to the padding under its paws. Being very soft, it does not make any noise while the cat moves. Similarly, the fog is also approaching the city of Chicago silently but surely. Coming to the concluding 4 lines, it sits looking over harbour and city on silent haunches and then moves on. The fog comes in like a small and silent cat, just sits and watches the beauty. But when it is over, the incidents caused by the fog are many. Many accidents occur. Next, the poet says that the fog sits over the whole of the city as a cat sits silently by folding her legs behind itself and looks around the nearby places and things. Here haunches means to sit with knees bent. We shall now see how the fog is compared to a cat. The poet tells how the fog comes stealing in very stealthily like a cat. And just like a cat sits quietly on its haunches and watches, so does the fog. It quietly watches over the harbour and over the city, sometimes for hours together, and then moves away. The poet says so because it's a natural phenomenon that fog does not stay at a place for long and then leaves the place after a few hours. So here the poet says that just like a cat, the fog leaves the place very silently without being noticed by anyone. So children, even though this poem of only 6 lines seems to be very simple, it has a very deep meaning. Sandburg uses this metaphor of fog and little cat feet to describe sadness and grief. This poem is about grief and sadness, but there is also hope in the end because we know that these emotions will just pass just like the fog. And then the very last line of the poem, and then moves on. Here what moves on? The fog moves on. It's a beautiful way of reminding us that even now we hold grief and sadness and other kinds of melancholy emotions in our heart. These emotions will pass, they are temporary, and we shall find joy, sunshine and light again. And it is important to remember that these emotions move just like the fog moves. Coming to the rhyme scheme of the poem, there is no rhyme scheme followed in this poem. This poem is in free verse or blank verse. The literary devices used are: number 1, metaphor, where the fog is compared to a cat. Example, on little cat feet. Number 2, enjambment, when a sentence continues to the next line and there is no punctuation mark. It sits looking up to the last line, then moves on. There is no punctuation mark. Literary device number 3, personification. Fog has been personified or has been given human qualities. Example, the fog comes on little cat feet. Number 2, it sits looking. Coming to the question and answers of this poem, please write down these in your class workbook. Question number 1. What does Sandburg think the fog is like? Answer. Sandburg thinks the fog is like a cat that comes silently so that no one can sense its arrival. Question number 2. How does the fog come? Answer. As per the poet, the fog comes very silently like a cat. Question number 3. What does it in the third line refer to? Answer. It refers to the fog. Question number 4. Does the poet actually say that the fog is like a cat? Find 3 things that tell us that the fog is like a cat. Answer. The 3 things that tell us that the fog is like a cat are as follows. The fog comes on its little cat feet. This means the fog enters silently just like a cat. It sits looking over the harbour and the city. The fog is compared to a cat because cats also like to sit and look here and there, and the fog is also looking while it sits over the city. On silent haunches, then moves on. The fog sits on her bended legs just like a cat and then moves away very quickly and silently, just like a cat. With this, we come to the end of the poem. Thank you and God bless.